Hello, I'm James Squires, and I'm the Chief Conservator here at the Clyfford Still Museum. Today, I'm going to discuss and demonstrate inpainting, or the cosmetic compensation for losses to artworks. Many consider inpainting to be very similar to painting. However, they're actually quite different. Painting is a creative, physical, and even expressive act that can be quite rewarding. Inpainting, on the other hand, is very precise and demanding and is directly tied to a specific artwork. Let me show you how we do this as conservators. So here is an example of how we might do some compensation work. So what you see here is a reproduction, really a printed card of pH 78. And within that, I created a damage, and here's the damage. You can see here that this is a large loss. And so we're missing part of this red form as well as some of these other forms, as well as the loss goes into the woman's skirt. So what we're going to do, the first phase is to actually fill the loss to the level of the paint itself. What I use for that process is basically what would be the equivalent of a spackle that we would see today. It's a paste material that we would then directly apply into the loss. And we would just basically spread that over the loss. For large losses such as this, we might do this multiple times because as this material dries, it shrinks. So we need to be particularly careful and aware of that fact. Conservators, much to many people's surprise, if there was texture to this paint, what conservators would do would actually be sculpt and texture the fill material and not expect the paint or the pigment to actually create the texture or mimic the texture of the artwork itself. So this is an example of how we would let this go and dry, we would fill these losses to the level. I have another card where this material was already dried, and I'll show that to you here. As you can see here, this is the lost shape, and then you can see excess on the outside. Those edges have to be cleaned up, and the way conservators clean those edges up is we literally use small swabs, cotton swabs. Generally, we create our own, and then we go on around and begin to wet that material, re-wet it, and then subsequently begin to remove it. The more material you put in, the more material inevitably you're going to have to take off. So you try to be very, very judicious. And you go through a lot of swabs. Because if you use one too often, all you're doing is spreading the material to other parts of the paint surface. So that's why you can see that I'm gently rolling the surface and beginning to remove it. What you can also do here to get the edges very precise, and you'll go over the entire surface. Another step that you can do is once it's softened, is that you can actually go in with a scalpel and gently begin to scrape that or slice that material off to exactly match the level of the fill. This can be a quite delicate and tedious process. You can see how I'm revealing all of that existing paint. And that's exactly what we want. Invariably, I would go back in and continue this process of using a small swab to begin to soften and then remove it and level it, and then maybe go back in with a scalpel and refine those edges. It's very important to get the edges as precise as you can, because if your filling isn't accurate and precise, your inpainting or your aesthetic compensation will always be visible. There's no getting around it because you'll always see the edge of the fill. So I have another card where I've cleaned that up a little bit more, and we can get a better idea of what we have right here. So here is a third card of the same damage. It's a bit more cleaned up and it's more or less leveled. And you can see the different forms now. What we're going to be doing now is where we begin the aesthetic compensation process, part of the process. What conservators take into consideration multiple factors in terms of the materials they choose to use for this process. In this case, the one key aspect is the idea of reversibility. Conservators, if it's an oil painting, will never use oil paint to do the restoration work That's because the materials are the same. We want to create a system where we are mimicking the shapes and forms, but we want to use materials that are easily distinguishable from the original. And secondly, can also be safely removed in the future. Because invariably our work over time may shift in color or do something like that and will need to be removed. So in this case, I'm going to be just using simple watercolor paints. And here's my palette. And right now I just have some real basic colors on here. So all the first steps really are just starting to begin to outline the forms. And so we have this form that we're outlining, and then we have these forms in here. And it's great if you have a reference image, as I have here, that you can see of what the losses actually are. So all I will do is basically wet my brush and just get some pigment on there. And all I'm trying to do is just do quick outlines. So I'm just trying to rough in this form. This is, in this sense, it's very much like painting, because all you're doing is you're layering light washes of color down to highlight and accentuate different forms. I will go in eventually and refine all of this. And I try to be relatively accurate in the color choices when I'm doing this outlining. So that is a black line that defines her dress. And in this case, I'm going to try to move into the blue of the forms. And so I'm going to use some blue, probably a little lighter than I would normally use. So I'm not matching the color exactly at this moment. Again, I'm just trying to define forms. So here, you can take this line this way. You can take this line this way. See what my form is. And then this one comes down. And in the image, it opens up like this. It doesn't have to be super duper precise. It just needs, you just need to block, what's called, in effect, blocking in the forms. So now I'm going to do a little bit of that same activity with the red. So I'm just trying to match or get the color. You can see right now it's quite bright. So I'm just trying to push that back a little bit and dull that red down just a little bit, just to get a tad bit closer. And so again, make sure your brush is very clean. And this is a hand, which is a little curious. And there's a thumb here. So you're just beginning to add that color. And you can see I'm not in painting, I'm only applying color to the loss, not over the original paint. The goal is to leave as much of the original paint as exposed as possible. And my job here is just to reintegrate the loss in such a way that it is not visually distracting. After I would do this, I would continue to look at the form. I might go in and add some of this darker tone in the background, which carry this tone into here, begin to refine these forms. Do that up here, in here. And again, looking at the design, I also have another blue form that I need to complete. And then I would just continue these forms and reintegrating these forms together and bringing them down and then slowly building this out. Again, coming back down to here, now that those forms are in, you just begin to fill this in with these thin washes and define the forms, and then you just slowly, like painters would slowly build color on top of it to create the illusion of what the artist originally created.